Dedicated to geeks and nerds, you're listening to Project I Radio, 24/7 Nerdgasm.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, the bizarre and weird fiction podcast. With me, your host, Mr. Frank. Welcome back. We're back again for another week of interviewing great authors in the bizarro and weird fiction genres. I hope everybody, all you zongers out there, I think it's really important for a host to sort of name his audience. And you guys, I'm going to affectionately call the zongers. So I hope all you zongers out there enjoyed our first interview with Mr. Danger Slater, the one and only. And I hope you've all been inspired to go out and buy his new book, I Will Rot Without You. Still not out yet, February 8th. Look for it then. But we're moving on. We got another great author this week we're going to talk to. I love interviewing this guy. His name is Kevin Strange. He's a great interview. He's got opinions on anything. I could ask him his opinion on kitty litter, and he would have a half-hour answer for me. He would tell me about clumping versus non-clumping, crystals versus gravel. He may even suggest you use newspaper. Ew. So, anyway, Kevin Strange's got a new book just out, only about a month now. It's called Texas Chainsaw Mantis. We talked to him a bit about that. We also talked to him about his book company he started several years ago. It's called Strange House Books. Grew to become one of the more influential publishers in the bizarro fiction circles. He's since given that up to focus on his own writing, but he's also infamous for being an independent filmmaker. Before he got into writing, he was an independent filmmaker, made some great movies. You can look up his stuff on YouTube. I personally like Nixon and Hogan Smoke Christmas. What a great little fucking movie you can watch for yourself for free. Just pop your own popcorn and watch messed up Santa Claus get a hand job from some demons. It's great stuff. So, I'm not going to bore you with all my details. I'm just going to unleash the man, Mr. Kevin Strange, on you all now, right here on Bizzong. So I want to welcome to Bizzong this episode, the one and only, the legendary Mr. Kevin Strange. Welcome to Bizzong.
I don't know about legendary, but what's up, Frank Edler? It's been a while.
It has been a while. Too long, in fact.
I've been listening to these, like, late at night when I'm writing. I've been listening to all of this controversy between Opie and Anthony on YouTube, and you've got that accent, so I feel like I'm in for something here, buddy.
No, not at all. No controversy here. Only love, sir. Nothing but love.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're going for the controversy ratings by having old Kevin Strange on your show.
I try not to. I let's say we'll ride on your infamy.
Okay. What's up, man? It's I love listening to your show, and it's been a while since you've had one. The other show that you do. Are we allowed to talk about that?
Sure, we can talk about that.
Yeah, you had me on there a couple of years ago, and I always thought that you were like the first dude to do a pod. Maybe not the first dude, but the first dude I knew of that was doing a podcast concerning the Bizarro community. And a lot of the first interviews I ever heard with some of the people that I respected and looked up to when I first got into writing Bizarro, I heard from your show. So I was really happy when you told me you were working with Project I Radio, because those guys we were just talking about off the air. Those guys really have their shit together.
They certainly do, and if nothing else, I do the podcast because I found the genre, and I love giving props. I'm a props guy. If you've done something spectacular, I want the world to know about it. I want to pat you on the back, and I think doing a podcast is a win-win for doing all that and getting exposure out there. So now being able to work with Project I Radio, I think we're going to step up the game on exposure to the bizarro and weird fiction field.
Good. It needs it.
And, when you think of that kind of stuff, you're one of the first people come to mind that I can talk to, and you have a lot of clout, shall we say, in the genre.
I don't know why. I've only been around, I guess I've been around a long time now. 3 or 4 years, but it doesn't feel like it, man. It feels like it's over. It feels like yesterday I was buying Eraserhead Press books and just Just feeling this excitement that there was that there was actually a genre out there for people who want to write, fucked up shit with no boundaries. And because that's the kind of movies I used to make. And I was frustrated with movies, and I wanted to write fiction because I just all of the logistics in making movies and the financial strain on my life was too much. But I still had this crazy desire to create, and so fiction was like the best alternative for me. But I didn't know. I thought I was just going to be writing for nobody. And when the thrill I felt when I found that there was a whole genre dedicated to the kind of weird fiction with no boundaries, with you could just write the craziest shit you could come up with, and that's probably not the craziest shit that's already out there. Like seeing shit like Cameron Pierce's Ass Goblins of Auschwitz or The Baby Jesus Butt Plug by Carlton Mellick. It's like, I don't even know if I can get this weird. And that's a great feeling. And it seems like that was just yesterday. So to hear that you think I got clout and that I'm one of the first names you think of, that means a lot to me, because I've worked really fucking hard to try to get my name out there. I felt like, have you ever seen the movie Thief by Michael Mann? It's an old movie with James Caan.
I can't say that I have.
Well, it's real quick. It's the story of a guy that he's a thief, and he spends like 25 years in prison. And when he gets out, he has one goal in mind. He wants to get married and have kids as fast as possible, because he felt like his whole life was gone. Like he was in a race to have the life he always wanted before he was too old to have it. And when I got into fiction, I felt the same way. Like, I've got to hurry up and get where I need to be with this, because I felt like at 30 I was getting a late start. And so I've, pretty much burnt the candle at both ends for 5 years to try to get myself as far and as wide as possible as a writer.
Now, when you say you discovered the genre and you embraced that, had you already started writing, and not necessarily movies, but actually written stories? Had you already started writing that, or did you write as a result of finding this?
No, I was writing, like, as soon as I finished my last short film in 2010 and I put it out and I just knew it was over. I started writing fiction. So I didn't make my debut I didn't get published until 2012. So from 2010 to 2012, I was writing, and that writing was strongly influenced by Bizarro once I had discovered it. I was writing what could be considered hardcore horror or extreme horror, but I wasn't really pushing hard because I didn't know where those boundaries were. I hadn't read Edward Lee or Wrath James White yet, so I was kind of just writing these tentative horror thriller stories, and I wasn't really feeling very good about it, to be honest, because that wasn't where my passion was. My passion was for stuff like Trauma movies and John Waters movies, and I always want to push the boundaries of good taste, and I always want to be in the discussion of what is this. I always want to be in the discussion of censorship. I want to push my stuff to the point that people question whether or not censorship is a bad idea. I like that's where my passion is, and you can sort of see following me on social media that I'm really passionate about freedom of expression and fighting censorship. And so once I discovered stuff that pushed those, and again, like when you read an Edward Lee book, you start questioning, like, can I get that fucked up? Can I get that gross? Can I get that sexually graphic? So that that stuff really informed my writing style. I was already influenced and inspired by guys like Harlan Ellison and Philip K. Dick and Joe Lansdale in the fact that it was really hard to categorize what they were writing. They were sort of writing cross-genre, and they would get classified as science fiction here, or like Western there, or horror, but they never really fit into those boxes. So I was already coming from a place where I wanted to not fit in. I wanted to cross genres and make people sort of think that they were being taken in one direction and pull the rug out from under them and go a different direction. But I hadn't found my boundaries yet, and I hadn't realized that there really are no boundaries, and that there shouldn't be. I've always felt that there shouldn't be boundaries, but getting into hardcore horror, extreme horror, and Bizarro, I realized that there are very few boundaries that haven't already been trampled all over. So that it sort of informed how far I was willing to go with my fiction.
continuing on that thought, I'm sort of picking up on a common theme and a common question I'm finding myself asking in these interviews. And when I hear you putting out all these labels about horror fiction, cult horror, splatter, one thing I keep asking the people I'm interviewing is how do you define Bizarro? Because it seems like everybody's got a slightly different definition, and it's hard to put a thumb on anything.
When I was at BizarroCon 2014, one of the things that I found that I found people talking about and discussing the most was that Bizarro is the literary version of Adult Swim, of Cartoon Network's Adult Swim. And what that means is if you go back from the beginnings of Adult Swim and you look at every subsequent season, it's something totally different. And if you look at Adult Swim today, it's nothing like it was when it started. There's no way to define what that is. People just ask, do you watch Adult Swim? And as it evolves and people that have followed it and continue to follow it, they know what that means. They say, yeah, I watch that fucked up shit. And the Bizarro genre is exactly the same for the literary crowd. It's never the same thing. You can't hold it down. It's going to wiggle free and find a different way to define itself every time. Every new wave of Bizarro writers come, or even writers themselves find ways to change the concept of what Bizarro can and should be every time they release something new. And that's what's really cool about it. You never know what you're going to get into the next time you crack open a Bizarro book.
That's so very true. Now, one of the things I notice is a lot of Bizarro. They always bring up trauma. Now,
right.
I have to shamefully admit that my only real exposure to trauma was like the Toxic Avenger 1 and 2. And I never really delved into it until just recently. And they were out on Netflix, and everybody was talking about it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to watch these fucking things. And I got to say, after looking at things like Poultrygeist or Romeo and Juliet, I think I thought of you and your writing most when I thought of trauma. I think that's what you're bringing to the table.
That's another great compliment. I really appreciate that, because the whole reason I got into filmmaking was I watched The Toxic Avenger Part 4. More specifically, I watched the feature-length making-of documentary called Apocalypse Soon. And in that documentary, it becomes so clear so fast that none of the people involved knew what the fuck they were doing. None of them had any business being there. They had rented a giant warehouse in the middle of the ghetto, and they had hundreds of people literally sleeping on concrete floors, and they were feeding them once a day with cold cheese sandwiches. And everyone was unhappy, and everyone was revolting and quitting and coming back. The special effects people had no idea what the fuck they were doing. Lloyd Kaufman is insane. The director of the film is literally like certifiably crazy, and no one could look to him for guidance because he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. He just knew that he needed a lot of tits and a lot of gore and a lot of people for quote-unquote production value. And it ended up being the assistant director, Trent Hega, who sort of rallied everyone together and sort of explained, like, yeah, my boss is crazy, but look at all the cool movies he makes. This is how he makes them. You want to make one, don't you? That's why you're here. And he would rally this chaos together. And so what ended up happening was a film was made out of controlled chaos. And as I was watching that documentary, I said, that's exactly what I want to do with my life. I want control. I want to create art through controlled chaos. And that's where I came from. That's where my passion for the films that I made came from. And whenever I switched to fiction, I wanted to create, so I didn't want to leave that behind. So I sort of wanted to create the literary version of that because I wasn't familiar with it. I wasn't familiar. I've never read anybody until I read a few. There's several Carlton Mellick books like Zombies and Shit and Ape Shit that he went that direction with it, on purpose. A lot of his shit isn't like that, but those are the ones that I would say really fit the trauma format, and that's how I want to be known all the time as a novelist. Is I want to write trauma novels. That's a fantastic way to describe what I do.
Now, to dig in a little more and get to something a little more specific, you recently had a book come out called Texas Chainsaw Mantis.
Yeah, that came out, did it come out this month? Last month. It came out at the very end of 2015, and I'm super proud of that book. I worked on it for a whole year, and yeah, it's really fucked up. It's really fucking weird.
and when I haven't had the pleasure of digging into it and reading it yet, but when I read the description, I definitely feel that trauma vibe is there. But I also lately your books seem to get a little more apocalyptic, maybe a little more like a dystopian post-apocalyptic world going on there. Do you feel like you're having
that's a theme. That's a theme.
Period.
I use that theme sometimes because how do you make a world with talking with anthropomorphic praying mantises that are human sized? It doesn't make any sense. And you could go sort of the like children's story fairy tale route where this is just a planet of talking, walking praying mantises, but I don't want to do that. So what I do and what I've done before is I just have them fucking destroy the whole human world and take it over. And that's what I did with Texas Chainsaw Mantises. Really quickly, the book literally in about 2 paragraphs tells you that a lab experiment went wrong. They made super intelligent praying mantises that grew to human size and killed everybody and took over their world. The end. And now here's the story of those praying mantises. So I like to use that because that sort of makes it, instead of being like a fairy tale, storybook sort of story, it's a post-apocalyptic story. So it already starts off with like a weird edge to it.
Now you always have really some of the best covers in the biz, I would have to say.
Thank you.
Tell me about who did the cover for Texas Chainsaw Mantis.
Jim Agpalza did the cover for that, and he is one of the weirdest authors artists working in Bizarro fiction. And I absolutely fell in love with his work when we became connected at BizarroCon 2014. And he's a super cool, super easy to get along with dude, and he is a crazy pervert. And the stuff that he does just has dicks all over it, vaginas all over. He has like a dick fetish, and I appreciate that about him very much. He draws dicks into almost everything he does. And what the way we got hooked up actually was, we had talked a little bit about doing work together because I absolutely needed to have a dick fetishist draw a cover for me. And what happened was I released this weird little Kindle Monster Erotica became this big deal for a minute, and making fun of, like, doing a parody of that, I wrote a gay Jesus erotica story about Jesus having sex with a dude's soul while he's ascending to heaven after a car accident. And I used a different artist for the cover, but Jim actually, when Jim Agpalza saw the cover when I posted it on Facebook, he freaked out and drew his own version of the cover and sent it to me and said, "Please don't use this or send it out or anything. I just did this for fun, but this is my take on Jesus and his Jesus and this guy with 4 dicks." So I knew at that moment, I was like, dude, the next book I write, you've got to do the cover for me. So he did. He did the cover for Texas Chainsaw Mantis, and he did a great fucking job. We went back and forth a little bit. He gave me several designs to choose from, and that's the one that I picked, and he did a fantastic job, and I actually can't wait to work with him again. I would love to have him do 10 or 20 of my covers. I like him so much.
See, now what you were just talking about there with the whole Jesus thing is what I hear when I hear you talk about, like, your premises. It's almost like I see a dial, right? A little dial with a little bunch of LED lights around it, right? And you take weird, right? So we got a mantis. That's level 1. Let me turn it. All right. Dick, they're big mantises. No, not weird enough. Dick, they're big, giant, alien mantises. Nope, still not weird enough. And you just keep turning that dial, making it weird, and then it's like, okay, there were the mantises that destroy the world, but we got to put a fucking chainsaw through his nose and make him
a haunted chainsaw.
Now we're like going, we're turning the dial till 11, and it's like, you really do seem to have a talent for turning that dial up and finding the perfect place to stop turning that dial, shall we say? Because I think there can be a point at which you go overboard.
Here's the thing about it is you've got to if you go too weird or get too crazy with the plot, suddenly you're in the realm of experimental fiction, and the plot and the story and the characters can get lost in the weird. And that's what Bizarro has often been accused of. It's been accused of being experimental fiction, and I don't think that that's fair. Some of it is, like we said, it's like Adult Swim. There's always going to be something different, and you can point to experimental Bizarro that doesn't make any sense, and it's just about imagery, sort of like a student film, where it's more about the atmosphere than it is about the story. But the way I do it is I absolutely want to find that perfect point between the weirdest possible premise and actually making it plausible and believable. If you're willing to go with me down the path that a scientific experiment went wrong and turned praying mantises into, giant man-sized super intelligent beings that can operate motor vehicles and teach school and stuff, then I'm going to give you a plot that makes total sense. I'm going to put them in a situation. If you accept my weird, crazy premise, I promise you I will put you in a story you can follow, and a story that will grip you and will have suspense and will have an awesome climax and conclusion if you're willing to go down that road with me. And so that's what, when I sit down to write something new and I'm developing the ideas, I always make sure I never go so far as to lose the plot and the story and the characterization.
I like that. Now, I sort of, as I was reading on your earlier middle works, I sort of keyed into something that you do. And you know where I'm going with this, but it was a subtle thing, and I'm sort of proud of myself for picking up on it. You had a tendency for making a creature, a big giant creature made up of millions of tiny little creatures. You did it, I don't know, you did it in Robom Apocalypse, correct?
Yes.
You did it in...
giant zombie made of zombies, fighting a time-traveling... a time-traveling giant zombie made of zombies fighting a giant robotic Barack Obama.
Yes. Then I know it was done in People Under the Stairs.
Humans Under the Bed.
The humans under the bed, I'm sorry.
That was...
One of the monsters was a fly made up of flies.
Well, so the monster is made up of... It's three little monsters. One monster can control flesh. Another monster can grow to superhuman size, and another monster is made of flies, so she was able to multiply herself to where the flies covered the giant monster, but the giant monster couldn't think for himself, so the little monster that could control flesh was inside of his head controlling him. And they are fighting metallic exoskeleton humans that have lived underground for 500 years, building themselves into an army that can all connect together, and they made a giant centipede out of their metal exoskeletons.
Did you hear the dial, folks? He was just turning the dial. He was just turning the dial. See, that's what I love. But even and it had been done in a few other places in your Strangeverse Lovecraft story. I forget the name of it offhand. Forgive me. McHumans.
Yeah.
McHumans, you also did it.
Well, McHumans, nothing got big, but the main characters killed these scorpion...
Oh, yeah, that's your other trademark thing. You kill things and use the body parts to kill the things, turn them on themselves.
Yeah, they stuff themselves inside the bodies and use their hard exterior shells and their claws and stingers as weapons to fight other things.
Yeah, that's another what I like to call strange trope.
Yes. Yeah, I love doing that. I grew up with Cronenberg and all of his weird fleshy fetish. So, you've got in Videodrome, you've got him, the main character, reaching into his own stomach and pulling out a gun that sort of grafts onto him, and he's got this flesh gun that he's pulled from his own body, and that's the kind of stuff that really excites me. I really get off on, not sexually, but I get off on, my imagination gets off on that kind of visceral body horror, really graphic, disgusting body horror.
That's what I was building towards with my description is the most recent thing I had read from you, and I got an opportunity to help review it on the Booked podcast, was your story in the anthology, the literary tribute to G.G. Allen, Blood for You, which I personally felt was the best story in the book.
I appreciate that, man. I listened to that podcast and I kind of did a little dance when you said that. I really appreciate that.
I truly, not just because we have had personal interaction, but I really did think that was the best story in the book, and it was because it was the most G.G. Allen-esque, shall we say, where you just took again, going back to the concept of millions of tiny things. Now you had giant humanoid robots, essentially, right?
Yeah, man.
They're like robot cities.
Like I said, I like to pull the rug out from under the reader, and I like them to think that I'm going one place with them, and I want to go somewhere completely different. So that story starts off with G.G. Allen in a doctor's office telling the doctor that he's constipated and getting into a fight with him, because G.G. Allen isn't normally going to go to the doctor, but it's affecting his concerts. He can't shit on the floor and throw it at people and wipe it on himself and eat it and shit. So I sort of set you up with that, but then a little ways into the story, I fucking completely pull the rug out, and it turns out that these aren't people. These are giant robots that were created because another scientific experiment gone wrong has created giant animals that have wiped out most of the planet. So their response is to build giant robot versions of themselves to live inside of. And those robots have cloning machines because so many people were killed. In order to keep the population from dying out, they have to clone each other. Only the cloning machine in G.G. Allen has malfunctioned and is causing him to be constipated because his entire body is full of G.G. Allens fighting and killing each other.
I mean, that's how do you make a better G.G. Allen story than that?
Well,
but then they're all coming and shitting and bleeding everywhere. It was over the top debauchery. That's what sold me on that story is the best.
I appreciate that. I was actually told by the editors that they received more G.G. Allen clone stories than any other, but they were only willing to put one in the book, and so they picked what they said was the best one. So I'll take that, I suppose. But all I was trying to do was, we were told very specifically for the call for submission, we were told very specifically, don't just make a story about G.G. Allen throwing shit and blood and beating people up. So I said, well, what if it was 1 million G.G. Allens throwing shit and beating each other up? Why not? Why not go there and have lasers and giant animals and robots? So I took it as far as I could possibly go with the premise before the story itself would have been lost if I had gone any further.
That was perfect. Now I want to almost continuing along that thought is since I have you, the former filmmaker, you've seen Kevin Smith's latest movies, right? Tusk.
Yeah.
And have do you know what he's coming out with, the yoga hosers? Are you familiar with what that is?
I'm not totally familiar with it. I know what it is. I've seen pictures from the movie, but I don't know what the plot is. I don't know what it's about. It
has something to do with the two the little young teenage girl chick clerks from Tusk. I forget the premise offhand, but what sticks in my head about what he's talked about on his podcast is he has hundreds of tiny little beings, humanoids, that essentially look like little fat Nazis, and he calls them the Bratzies. And he had to come up with this whole thing about the Bratzies and make the uniforms and everything like that. And all I can think of is fucking Kevin Smith reading Kevin Strange books.
Well, if he
Tusk not necessarily, but I get the impression that Kevin Smith is reading Bizarro, period, because where does this shit come from?
That's fantastic. It's Kevin Smith doing Kevin Strange. I can't wait.
I can't wait either. But I really get the feeling like, and he's got, after this yoga hose, he's going to do Moose Jaws. I mean, how much more bizarro a concept do you need?
There's people. This is kind of taking it in a new agey direction. I won't spend a lot of time here, but people say that like once mankind reaches a certain point, the entire sort of human race catches up. Like when a runner, like a sprinter, beats the best time, there's always someone inevitably right after that, even though they've never broken that time ever before in the history of these sports. Someone else will come along and beat that record. The idea is that like somehow our universal consciousness, like I said, I was going to take it in a new agey area, that we have like this universal consciousness, and once we prove to ourselves that we are capable of something, then everyone is capable of it, or someone is like it's always the boundaries are always being broken. And I think that Kevin Smith he may not have ever even heard of Bizarro Fiction. He may not even know that it's out there, but in his own mind, he's pushed himself so far. He's tapped into what we tap into. He's telling himself like there's so much normalcy in entertainment that I have to push past that normalcy. The premise has to be something so weird nobody's ever heard of it before. And I think that's what Bizarro Fiction was born out of. I think it was born out of everything else has been done and commercialized and homogenized to a point that you have to go further. You have to take it a step further and be even weirder.
There's really something to that, because he was ready to retire. He did Red State, and he was like, I'm just done with this. There's nothing more for me. And he had, through conversations on his podcast, he just came up with that crazy idea for Tusk, reading an article in some obscure Canadian newspaper thing, and it was born out of a conversation. You can go listen to the episode that Tusk was born of, and it was that crazy over the top like idea, like, I want to make this movie, and I don't give a fuck who likes it, and I don't give a fuck if it makes box office or not. I'm gonna raise the money myself, and as long as I can raise the little money necessary, I'm gonna make this movie, and I don't give a fuck who likes it. And that really is sort of the Bizarro mantra, right?
I would absolutely say that's a Bizarro movie. Absolutely, any of the Bizarro guys could have written the fictional version of that. Because and I think the reason that it's got such a bad rep is because people can't classify it, can't categorize it. Is it a horror movie? Is it a comedy? Is it? And it's not. It doesn't play like a horror comedy. A horror comedy plays where the whole world's weird and the characters react to it, or the characters are weird and the world reacts to it. Whereas in Tusk, any given scene, you don't know whether to laugh or to be disgusted.
Yeah, after I went to the theater and watched it, I had to go see it, and my initial reaction at the end was like, I really dug the shit out of that, and I know that it hasn't even sunk in what that was. Like,
yeah.
You're like, what the fuck did I just watch? But yeah. I knew I liked it, but I also knew immediately, I'm like, no Kevin Smith's fan is gonna get that, right. unless they like Bizarro, unless they're into that weird thing already. His regular everyday fan is just not going to get that shit.
That was the extreme horror version of Kevin Smith, and that was I took my brother to see it, and my brother's not into any of the stuff I am. He's just a regular mainstreamy dude, and it was so fun watching that movie with him for his reactions to how fucked up that movie gets. I loved it. I don't know a lot of people who even liked it, but I loved it.
I agree, and I think what I'm sort of surprised about, I haven't seen it a lot, is nobody's really pointing out the connection to Tusk and Bizarro. And I think I want to say it sort of needs to be done. Somebody has to sit there and go, is Kevin Strange naturally doing Bizarro? Is he aware of Bizarro? Can we somehow, make this connection and sort of broadcast it? And those few people, those few outside fans of his that are kind of going, well, I kind of like that. Can we bring them in over to our side and let them know there is this whole world, and maybe even grow it bigger? So I'm looking forward to when Yoga Hosers comes out.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like more of this strange fucking Bizarro going on. And I'm hoping that connection gets pointed out more and kind of can help wave the flag of Bizarro for everybody.
Yeah, I think we're in a point right now. I think we hit this weird point in Bizarro about mid-year last year where the bubble is straining and it needs to burst. We need to get bigger and we need to get wider. There are a lot of people and a lot of ideas and a lot of books, and there's not enough coverage of it. There's not enough people reading it. The bubble needs to burst soon. Or maybe I'm just noticing that it will burst soon, but it's chock full of people that are just dying to be heard, dying to get this message out, and it needs to happen. I hope it happens this year.
So what do you think? Do you think we need more presses focusing in on more niche things? Do we need to just let it all trickle up to Eraserhead and let them wave the flag? What do you see going on in that fashion?
Well, I think naturally the best gets up there. The best of the best is going to make their way to the best press that has the most skill and knowledge about publishing. As far as like the small presses that sort of pop up and put people out, there are good ones, there are bad ones. They come and they go. Some last a couple of years, some don't even last that long. It's really about the talent. At the end of the day, it's not about how it gets out, but that the talent does get out. With Chainsaw Mantis, I didn't give it to anybody. I just put it out myself because I think I can do a better job promoting it than most anybody can, or at least I like to control how it's promoted. So I'm not with any press right now. I just sort of trying to make myself a brand in that regard.
I'm going to give you the hardball question now on that
right.
note.
Let's do it.
Obviously, everybody knows, or if they don't, you owned at one point in time. You started Strange House Books.
Uh-huh.
You grew it to a point. It became very popular. You were fond of saying it became its own thing, right?
Yeah.
Separate of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you felt it was time for you to step away from Strange House.
Yeah.
To try to, I don't know, what were you doing? You were like trying to make your own name on your own without using the press?
Yeah, it was just those guys deserved more. They deserved more out of me, and I was restless, and I really wanted to do what I'm doing exactly what I'm doing right now. I think it was too. I think when I look back on the history of it, I opened a press too fast, and I hadn't fulfilled my personal goals yet, and so I was fulfilling the goals of this. I was blowing this publishing house up and doing way better than I ever expected by doing so, but at the cost of my own creativity and my own fiction. So I stepped away from it so that I could build what I'm building right now.
Okay, I got you.
The people that were published at Strange House, they didn't need me. They didn't need my help. They just need those are all household Bizarro names now. The guys that had their first couple books put out through Strange House. I did my part. I did my job.
You totally
I got
did
those
your
guys
job.
into the zeitgeist of Bizarro, and that was my goal. But I wasn't doing me the way I needed to do me. So I was at a point where I was like, well, I could either close it all down, and those guys' books will then be out of print, and it's really hard to get a book back in print through a different publisher once it's already made the money it's going to make and done what it's going to do. And without like an extensive rewrite and a new cover and all this stuff, getting a book back in print is a pretty difficult task. And I built personal relationships with all the people that I published, so I didn't want to see that happen to them. Some of those guys only have books through Strange House, so they would have suddenly went from being published for 3 or 4 years to back to being unpublished authors, and I did not want to see that happen to them. So I thought the next best thing would be to give the press to somebody that could do it justice. So that's what I tried to do.
It sounds like you made a conscious decision to focus on your writing.
Everything was going fine. Like it was me and my editor Sean Ferrari running the business part of it, and everything was going great, and it was sustaining itself financially. I never made any money off of it, and he never made any money off of it, but it was, we weren't struggling by any manner of means. The only thing I was struggling with was finding the time to write my own books. And I told him that, and I gave Sean the option of, I was like, look, if you want to run this thing, I'll take my hands off of it, and you can run it. And he in the end, he just wanted to be my editor. He wanted to work with me. He was working at Strange House so he could work with me. So we both made the decision that it's in both of our best interests then to just let the thing go and try to make sure that the authors have a home that'll do them right, and it'll make sure that they get paid and taken care of.
So you're looking beyond the future, in the future of that decision now. Are you happy with that decision?
Let's just say yeah.
Fair enough.
Let's just say yeah, that was awesome.
You think it was right for you as a writer? You think that was the best decision?
Right for me. It was right for me. I'm where I need to be.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough.
Have you seen the bear fuck Leonardo DiCaprio?
The bear fuck Leonardo DiCaprio? No. Is this like a Brokeback Mountain thing?
Almost.
Oh,
almost.
okay.
No, there was like this. The studio had to put out this statement that was like, there is no bear rape in The Revenant. Leonardo DiCaprio is not raped by a bear. I was like, what the fuck? So I went to see this movie, and he basically gets attacked and left for dead by a bear at the beginning of this movie. And there are certain shots that look like the bear's fucking him.
But you went to go see the movie based on the fact that they had to put out a statement saying that Leonardo DiCaprio does not get raped by a bear?
Yes, absolutely. When you
you didn't want to see the movie before that?
There's no bear rape in this movie. I'm the guy going, so there's bear rape?
Fair enough. So what's going on for you? Texas Chainsaw Massacre's out now. I know you've been working on it for probably the better part of a year, right, to get that out?
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw Mantis, I started working on it in around November of 2014, and it came out in December of 2015.
Okay, so have you already got something else going on, writing, or what's the future?
Always. I've got several half-written, not necessarily half, but quarter, one-third written novels that I may or may not return to. It's really, I have to still be passionate about the stuff, and sometimes I start writing something and I step away from it for too long, and when I come back, I'm just like, I guess I'll write something new. So I'm in the middle of transcribing a novella that I wrote several years ago by hand into notebooks. I'm finally getting around to transcribing it, and it's going to be, I have 2 collections of short stories, but each collection is sort of anchored by a novella that's between like 60 and 80 pages. So this will be no different, and I'm transcribing that novella right now, and my next release should be my 3rd short story collection.
Fantastic. How about other anthologies? You're still plugging away, getting little things here and there?
There will be, I'm waiting on a lot of anthologies to actually come out right now that I wrote stories for last year. I spent the most of 2015 writing short stories, which is why I have this collection that I'm about to put out. And some of those stories that I wrote still haven't, those anthologies still haven't come out. So you'll see a lot of that, but as far as I haven't really written much for anthologies in 2016 yet. I'm focused on getting this short story collection out and then another novel, because that year or 15 months or 13 months that it took between Chainsaw Mantis to be written and come out was painful for me. I didn't really have anything new and fresh to promote, and I sort of, if I don't have anything creative going on, I sort of start to eat myself. I start to gnaw on my arms and shit, and I get really cunty. As you can see on my when you see me getting cunty on social media, it's because I'm not working. It's very easy to see when Kevin Strange is working and when Kevin Strange is frustrated, and they're 2 very different moods. And I like to stay in the mood where I'm working, and so I'm trying to stave off the cuntiness and the bad moods. I'm trying to stay as active as possible, and I've actually got a book signing tour for Texas Chainsaw Mantis coming up in April. I discovered, since moving out of my hometown into St. Louis several years ago, that St. Louis, Missouri has an amazing selection of bookstores. When people tell you independent bookstores are dead, they've never been to St. Louis. There are a dozen stores here that I just love to spend, and St. Louis is huge, so I'm talking about the counties and the city, which is about a 60-mile radius. There's like 12 bookstores that I love hanging out in and buying books in, and several of them do they have author readings. And so I set up this tour, like I said, it's from the very bottom of South County, St. Louis, to the very tip top of North County, St. Louis. So it's 60 miles apart. I've set up a 3-day, three bookstore tour where I'm going to sign books and read from Texas Chainsaw Mantis. And I also have several out-of-town Bizarro guys coming in to support me that'll also be doing readings and signings, but I haven't announced yet who those guys are. I'm going to announce them one at a time, slowly, as we get closer to the book signing tour date.
That's awesome, and it's awesome that you have in your area so many local bookstores. I have noticed that in Illinois. I can see you guys out there. You have a lot of local stuff out here on the East Coast. Man, if it ain't Barnes & Noble, those little mom and pops, they are so hard to find. And when you do find that rare gem, they're just not interested in the crazy, so we don't have that. Anyway,
yeah, there's some that don't. It amazes me. There's a store in South City, St. Louis, right on the strip, one of the most popular strips in St. Louis. And I went in there, and this bookstore, it's a used bookstore. It's 3 stories tall. There's the ground level, then there's an upstairs, and there's a basement. And the fucking horror section was one shelf, not a bookshelf, but one shelf on a bookshelf. And there's got to be fucking 50,000 books in there, and yet there's like 13 horror books. Like, what the fuck does this guy have against horror? And it's got to be a personal choice made by the bookstore owners to just not have that genre, because it's rich. I have my horror bookshelf at my house is bigger than this dude's bookshelf, and I've got world famous Bram Stoker award winning authors on my shelf, and this dude doesn't carry them.
It boggles my mind, because you would think a local mom and pop store, they would need niche stuff, some very original, not the crap you'd find on Barnes & Noble, which I don't know how you even find any book in Barnes & Noble anymore. That's another story unto itself.
Well, that's funny, because there's several bookstores here that are just new stuff. They only carry brand new books, and it's shit. When I walk in there, I'm totally disappointed. I'm like, fuck you. It's the mixed stores. It's the stores that carry the newest stuff, but also have huge sections, backlog sections of stuff from the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's like a video store. You don't want to walk in. I guess that's what fucking killed the video store, was walking into a Blockbuster and there was only the newest stuff and that rich catalog of weird horror shit. That's what kept mom and pop shit in business. Have you watched the Electric Boogaloo documentary on Netflix about Canon Films?
Yes, I have.
They made some of the coolest action, horror, erotic, comedy. It wasn't just one genre. They just produced weird, fucked up shit in all genres. And the Death Wish movies, they're not horror, they're action, but they are absolutely fucking bonkers, crazy violent. So that's the kind of stuff that you miss out on at a bookstore when you don't carry stuff like Richard Lehman or John Skipp and Craig Spector books, or Bentley Little books and stuff like that. You don't get the rich history of horror and suspense, and they even put that stuff in thriller and mystery. They go ahead and you categorize it however you want to. If you don't carry that stuff, you're missing out on some of the coolest fiction we've had in the 20th century.
I can say this. I've been poo-pooing on Barnes & Noble's business model for years now, but I was recently, over the past summer, in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I popped into the Barnes & Noble over there, and it was the usual stuff. Half the store was University of West Virginia sweatshirts and pots and pans, and had nothing to do with books, and I'm like, it doesn't matter where I go, it's the same. Like, it's just depressing to walk into Barnes & Noble and see that kind of stuff. But on my way out, there was a bookshelf just off to the side of the registers, and I caught it like on my way out the door, and it said local authors, and I did that cartoon skid and threw up a cloud behind me. I said, holy shit, this is a Barnes & Noble. I walk over there, and I shit you not, it was legit. All local authors. They did not have to be HarperCollins, Penguin published books, very independent shit off of CreateSpace. And a whole, from floor to ceiling, one section of a bookshelf. And I said, wow, I'm fucking impressed. And I'm like, well, how the fuck did they even do this shit? And when I went home and I kind of researched it, and it turns out that Barnes & Noble does seem to be experimenting with local authors. There is a program. You got to kind of dig for it, but you can submit your book to this system for local authors, and they vet it out and they look through everything. But there is now an avenue if you want to try to get your books into a local Barnes & Noble. You got to dig through the website a little bit, but there is an avenue for it, and I was kind of impressed by that.
If they don't start doing stuff like that, if they don't go back to the roots of it, they're not gonna be around. I'm surprised they're still around now.
Everybody's kind of announced their death knell for years now.
Yeah.
And they are still somehow hanging on. And look, I'm sure to operate on that larger scale, you got to put pots and pans in your store. But when you look through the book section, it's depressing, and you think I'm in a bookstore, and like I can't even get like Stephen King half the time. Like even that's like outrageous, and I got to go looking through the sci-fi. Why would I look through sci-fi for Stephen King? It's outrageous. So it's disheartening, but it was a nice little glimmer of hope that I saw down there in West Virginia. And I really do shy away from Barnes and Noble physical stores anymore. So I haven't had a chance to get into my local stores around here to see if that's happening around here, but I sure hope it does.
That's a shame, man, that you guys don't have great local bookstores. Because for me, it's like every weekend I go out and spend a whole day just going to all these bookstores, and there's just great stuff. I have to research authors. There's so many of them. Like the last time I was in a Borders Books before they went out of business, their horror section was one shelf, not a fixture, but one shelf of Stephen King and one shelf of Dean Koontz, and it's asinine. There's so many fantastic horror authors out there and bizarro authors, and that one of the stores that I'm going to be reading in actually had bizarro books kind of sprinkled throughout their horror section. So Bizarro doesn't necessarily have its own section, but it has it has a presence in their horror section, and their horror section is like 4 fixtures front and back. And a ton of stuff. They even have it separated by this is called, for anyone that's local to me, I guess, that's listening to this place that I'm talking about is called Books Galore in Festus, Missouri, which is a little ways out of the city, down south. But they even have so they've got their paperback horror section, then they've even got a hardcover horror section that's just the hardcover stuff. And that's I when I first started looking around here, I was skeptical, but man, I was so surprised, so happy, and so relieved that there's such a representation around here. And hopefully by the time we're done with them there at Books Galore and we do our signing there, and I bring all these cool, bizarro authors in there to read with me, hopefully they'll make us a section. Hopefully they'll put up a bizarro section. I know there's people throughout the country that are used bookstore clerks that are starting their own like grassroots, like putting bizarro sections up in their stores and sort of trying to showcase weird fiction. So I'm and hearing that Amazon is now going to open a brick and mortar store, like I think that things are swaying back in the direction of bookstores, man. I think that we may have actually weathered the storm of the giant corporate bookstore, and we might be seeing a resurgence of used bookstores or independent bookstores anyway.
There is that sort of sparkle in the air, I will say this, and I do have to say I'm tickled pink that you mentioned Books Galore, because as it happens, you might have even walked by. I'm involved with a series of straight horror books called The State of Horror.
Oh yeah, they've got Illinois and Missouri.
Illinois, Missouri, and New Jersey, and I'm in North Carolina, New Jersey, and Illinois, as it were, and those books are stocked there. They've worked very close with that publisher. They've done food drives. The publisher's done food drives there and giveaways, and they've worked very closely with Books Galore. So, I mean, to hear that, I'm thinking it's just one little publisher there, but to hear you bring it up and know that bookstore is doing a lot of good, that's great. So, if you're around, you should totally support that bookstore.
Yeah, and they're not the only one in St. Louis that's doing that kind of stuff. I mean, it's really cool. One more little thing I was just going to say is I've never had much local support for any of the stuff that I've done, because St. Louis is more of a sports and beer town than it is anything artistic. They don't even have a big local music scene, but I've been really inspired by how easy it's been to work with these independent bookstores. So.
That's great, and I hope it does continue. Now, we're almost out of time. I only got about 5 minutes left, but I do want to circle back to the idea to close out this show. I want to circle back out to the idea that you're a cunt.
Okay. That's a great way to end it.
It is. It really is. So, and the reason I say that is because you said you're a cunt when you're not producing, right?
Yeah.
And what you have been doing recently to become less of a cunt, you've become a proactive and not being a cunt, and you've started this little video series called oh my god, now goddamn thing,
it's called Motivational Strange.
Motivational Strange. I want to say Inspirational Strange. You've started Motivational Strange,
And what I tell people about it is I started it as much for myself as I started it for other writers. Because, yes, I will be a sanctimonious cunt about, one of the big problems with social media is if we're all sitting in a room together drinking coffee and talking, we're not going to, most likely, unless we're all a bunch of cunts, we're not going to bring up religion and politics. Or big controversial social subjects, because we all know we have different opinions and we'll all get mad at each other if we start arguing. So we avoid stuff like that. Social media refuses to avoid stuff like that, and they want to talk about all of it. And I get really cunty about it because my position is and will always remain. Any subject you throw at me, I'm going to say whatever. My response is whatever protects freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and we aren't in a culture that sort of respects that anymore. So if I'm not busy working and focusing on my stuff and on writing and on publishing, then I'm going to get drugged into those conversations and people don't like what I have to say. Because like I said, it's not the popular prevailing opinion, and I get real sanctimonious and cunty about it when I talk because I'm just really passionate and I'm a cunt. So in order to avoid that, I sort of started this video series on Periscope called Motivational Strange, where I just give little tips and tricks of I've been now writing screenplays and fiction for 13 years. I wrote and produced my first short film at age 23 in 2003. So I've been doing this for a little while, and I feel like I've got a bit of knowledge I could put out there, or at least an opinion that some people might find useful or valuable to some small degree in their own pursuits. And that series really has helped me to calm down and focus on what's important and not get into those stupid social media fights anymore. So, I mean, I know I'm not going to avoid it forever, those things forever, but right now I'm doing a good job of pretending that they're not there.
Well, that's fantastic. And one of the out of your writing, one thing I've always appreciated about you is that you are not afraid to be a coach for others. You're not like, well, just me and that's it. You're always willing to help out others and give advice and just share your opinion. You're not saying it's absolute, but this is my experience, this is my opinion, and that's invaluable to others who are also looking to work in the genre. So it's you're turning that negative of being a cunt into a positive, and keep that up, definitely.
Yeah, no, I know. It's nobody wants to see me being a cunt, and I feel bad about it when I do get into fights and arguments and stuff. It's just I refuse to not be honest. I'm always going to come from a place of sincerity and honesty in my life, and I'm always going to try to protect the ability for others to say and do whatever they want, no matter who likes it or not, no matter what the popular consensus is about those subjects at any given time in history, and that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. So I'm trying to learn to just keep my mouth shut. One of my great friends, Danger Slater, a co-author of a book we wrote together called Stranger Danger that was nominated for a Wonderland Book Award last year, he just straight up told me the other day, he's like, bro, just don't talk about religion and politics. He's like, I don't talk to you about that stuff, you don't talk to me about that stuff, and we're great friends. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take that advice to heart, and I'm going to try to treat social media like it was a friend. And even though I'm passionate about the ability for people to speak their mind, I don't have to talk about it every day. And I know that turns people off that are coming to me for inspiration or whatever, or motivation, as it were, for because of the knowledge I have and the kind of stuff I write. So I'm trying to just that part of me will always be there, but I'm trying to just put it on the back burner and let it, if someone wants to come to me privately and ask my opinion about things, I won't hesitate to give it to them. But it doesn't need to be front and center of every day on social media for me.
I can think of no better thought to close this interview out on than that.
Right on, man.
So I want to thank you for coming on and interviewing for the new Bizarro show.
Yes.
It's
Bizarro
always
Bong, is that what it's called?
Bizzong.
Bizarro Bong, this is your new show about smoking weed.
Whatever it needs to be for you, that's what it is.
Bizzong, you've been listening to Bizzong
You
from
have been.
Frank Edler on iProject Radio. My name is Kevin Strange.
How about it, Zongers? Did I tell you Kevin Strange was a great interview or what? Hope you all enjoyed this episode. Hope you all go out, check out Kevin Strange's Texas Chainsaw Mantis or any of those other books out there. They're all really, really fun reads. So, before we part with you this week, I'd just like to say that we're not going to have like an email address to contact us now, but I have set up a page on Facebook for the Bizzong podcast. That's at facebook.com/Bizzong. If you have any kind of like bizarro news you want to get out into the world, or if you just want to kind of get in touch with us, you have some interest in coming on Bizzong, being interviewed for Bizzong, don't hesitate to contact me on Facebook podcast page for Bizzong. I will consider all your requests and all your information to get out on this podcast. So until next week with another great interview, thank you, Zongers, for listening to Bizzong.